I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Honduras to introduce the statement of his head of state. You have the floor.
Señora Presidente.
Madam President, it is my great honor to present the pre-recorded statement by Juan Orlando Hernández Alvarado, President of the Republic of Honduras.
Señores jefes de Estado y de Gobierno.
Heads of State and of Government. Mr. Volkan Bozkir, President of the 75th Session of the United Nations General Assembly. Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General. Greetings to you all. 75 years ago, 51 countries signed the United Nations Charter. They did so hoping to rid the world from war and to ensure respect for dignity and the fundamental rights of people, with justice, social progress, and freedom. As a founding member state of the UN, Honduras supported these lofty goals from the very beginning. In the same way in which we were moved by the consequences of the two great global wars, and we sought back then to show the very best of our human species, uniting together in this global forum and establishing this organization, which is today the largest international organization that exists in the world. Today, as we are immersed in a new global crisis born out by the COVID-19 pandemic, we must seek new ideas, new consensus. We must be more creative and wiser if we are to realize the principles and goals that were laid down in 1945. I myself, as a survivor of COVID-19 and as a leader of a developing country which is fighting to beat this pandemic, I wish to express our concern about the multifaceted consequences of this emergency which we are grappling with today. This emergency has affected our generation in an unprecedented way in the domains of health, education, migration, basic services, human rights, and the economy, and it has particularly affected the most vulnerable in our society. This has led to great harm in social terms, with the scarcity of medicines, food, a loss of jobs. And now the monumental task of rebuilding our economies is looming, while we must strike a balance between protecting health and trying to reboot our economy. We must give our people confidence again, at a time when they are wondering what is around the corner. Because these global crises will probably continue to occur, with social unrest around the world, caused not just by the threat of greater public health problems, but also by conflicts, land ownership disputes, food, water, political ideologies, and so on and so forth. Before I continue addressing this issue, which is the most important one that we are grappling with today, I would like to mention some of my government's achievements, which we have notched up together with the people of Honduras. Today, Honduras has been able to reduce the number of violent deaths by some 60%. We are no longer one of the most violent countries in the world. By joining together our forces, for the first time in history, we have been able to face up to the formidable criminal structures which have sufficient muscle and economic power to destabilize an entire country. But we did this without fear. We were well aware of what we were facing. Honduras would like to place on record its gratitude to the United Nations system for its support in our struggle to protect our people. This is one of many domains in which we have worked together. And I would take this opportunity also to remind you of our request made over the last few years for organized non-state groups, such as gangs and drug traffickers, to be recognized by the United Nations as terrorist groups. Over the last 75 years, we have seen, in this forum magnificent orators, great speeches written by the best intellectuals from every country, great leaders with the best turns of phrase. However, we have not been able to avoid wars. We haven't been able to avoid inequity, and we have not eradicated poverty, nor have we stamped out the many epidemic or endemic diseases. I consider that over the last 75 years we have not been able to completely fulfill the altruistic purposes that were set down when this organization was created, or certainly not all of the purposes and principles that were laid down in 1945. This pandemic has shone a crude light on the real inequality in the world. At a time when we're all seeking medicines, equipment for hospitals, or the so yearned for vaccines, only a few countries will be able to have broad access to them, first in line, and it will not be those most in need. We have also seen cases in which there is medicine in short supply, in which the producing country has withheld production. And the same thing happens with medical equipment. In some countries, production has been appropriated for the exclusive use of that country, and the sale to other countries has been prohibited. But what about other nations? Are people supposed to just be left to die? What about the vaccines? What's going to happen there? Who will have access to the vaccines? Are there already lists of countries for the vaccines? In this crisis, the World Health Organization, and this applies particularly to us, issued some recommendations at the beginning of the pandemic that we thought were very timely and useful. And we also received support from the PAHO when it comes to the purchase of medical equipment, which was very useful for us. But we also saw occasions in which we were not in agreement with the recommendations made by the WHO. For instance, when they told us that the use of face masks was not necessary. Nevertheless, we took upon ourselves the decision to provide them to our entire population. We had to take our own decisions based on our own experience. Our doctors and our health personnel have worked on the front lines to beat back this pandemic. We regard them as heroes because they have put their lives on the line day after day over the last 6 months, and they have worked tirelessly. On the basis of their experience, they have been able to identify some medicines that in practice have yielded quite promising results. Low-cost medicines which are freely available in our country. In particular, there are 2 treatments which we call maíz and catracho, to give them their Spanish names. Thanks to them, we have been able to reduce the mortality rate from 9% at the beginning of the pandemic to some 3% or even less currently. In addition, thanks to the Fuerza Honduras program today, which means giving each municipality the medical equipment and supplies that they require, through this program we have been able to provide free healthcare to those who most need it, through stabilization or triage centers and medical teams who go to people's houses to seek out the sick. We will never tire of thanking our heroes, those who have been on the front lines, our doctors, health personnel, and first aid workers. When the technology and science exists to preempt certain situations, and above all, if there is information available about a threat to global health, then this information must be shared to all countries in a transparent and timely way. This would avoid the information being manipulated to the benefit of some interests in particular nations. For instance, it was very useful for our doctors to receive and share information from and with doctors in Europe and the Americas. Had this not happened, we would have considered it to be a crime against humanity. It is also the obligation of all states in the system to provide information that is so sensitive for human life to the world, either through the World Health Organization or directly to countries. If this pandemic doesn't make us change our attitude towards others, then nothing will. Because this virus has attacked us all equally. Regardless of how wealthy you are, you have not been entirely sheltered from this disease. This virus has reminded us in the harshest way that at the end of the day, we are all human. We're all vulnerable. We're members of the same species. Even though we may speak in different languages, we may see each other differently, or we may live in different corners of the world. We should reflect on this point. I also believe, and I say this with full respect, that the time has come to revise the entire United Nations system. It must be made more efficient and effective in order to attain the goals laid down when the organization was established. This organization must provide the necessary knowledge and information to prepare us for what is to come. There must be a permanent forward-looking analysis carried out with the best resources and technology so that we don't simply move forward blindly. Our peoples deserve more equality in their access to health, technology, information, and education. Given what is happening today, the Sustainable Development Goals agreed upon in 2015 must be revised and updated to bring them in line with this new reality which we are experiencing today. All of this must be accomplished while avoiding excessive red tape. For instance, when this pandemic broke out, we sought the support of the United Nations Development Programme as we attempted to launch a digital wallet project which would allow us in a transparent way to make transfers to the neediest people in our country, to those who most needed income while they had to stay at home. Various months have now passed, and even though I personally spoke with high-ranking officials at the UNDP, the process is still not concluded, and those affected are still waiting for assistance. Ladies and gentlemen, the events of the past, present and future hinge to a great extent on climate change. The new epidemics come from changes in the environment and the scarcity of resources and hunger. They all have a common genesis, which is our lack of respect for nature and the looting of our natural resources. On this matter, we need to move from theory to facts, from fine words and eloquence to the nitty-gritty of reality. Climate change has been an emergency now for several years, and we still don't know where the famous green climate funds are to be found. We have been seeking them for several years now, but we still have not received them. I would like to know where these green climate funds have got to. Why are they not reaching the neediest countries such as ours? I would like to remind you that Honduras is one of the 3 most vulnerable countries in the world to the effects of climate change. Every year we are affected by drought and extreme rainfall and floods, and even plagues on our crops, such as coffee and grain, which have suffered so harshly over the last few years as a result of extreme weather events. This has a terrible effect on our economy and our people's health. For instance, today the coffee prices are improving slightly in comparison with previous years, but this only goes to show how volatile a sector that provides sustenance for millions of families throughout the world actually is in practice. As an illustrious citizen of the world said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We must act swiftly to move from words to deeds, from rhetoric to action, on this issue and on all issues, in fact. Are you not concerned by our inaction? Are you not concerned that we seem to be going round and round in circles on these matters? I certainly am. I'm certain that I'm not the only one. But fortunately, I'm able to say that we still do have time to act on these issues. Secretary General, climate change, natural disasters, and epidemics affect our economy. They are problems that cannot be laid at the door of small countries. But as they affect the economy, they prevent us from fulfilling the parameters that are imposed on us by financial organizations. But these events should fairly be borne in mind, and the poorest and most vulnerable countries shouldn't be castigated with poor ratings by these agencies. There should be differentiated ways of meeting these countries' needs, and special ways of ensuring that they can achieve economic and social growth. The time has come for us to speak seriously about the financial relief that we should receive from our international creditors. And here I'm referring to multilateral lending organizations, because to date they have not been able to meet the challenge posed by this colossal tragedy, and there has been a weak response to the need for financing, for deferments, to allow us to deal with the severe recession we are experiencing. We're convinced that, aside from criticism, solutions must also be found, given the size of the global challenge. We therefore respectfully propose that the Secretary General convene a select group of global leaders who have been successful in the domains of economic development, healthcare, education, small business, and technology applied to our new reality. The aim of this would be, inter alia, to set up a plan or a roadmap so that we can all come through this crisis successfully. If this does occur, the United Nations system will be able to say that it rose to the occasion, and we will be able to say that we fulfilled our promise to our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I would like to thank the President of the Republic of Honduras for the statement just delivered. Now I would like to give the floor